Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope we're all well and thank you very much for tuning in. Yesterday, MK Studios released their highly anticipated update for Dublin Airport. This update adds not only the new runways to the airport, but is a complete overhaul of the original version. The original not being terrible by any means, but is definitely looking rather dated now when compared to modern standards. This update is a payware update for existing users, and this did come as a little bit of a surprise. I think for most people, myself included, may have just been happy with the addition of the new runways and a little sprucing here and there, and not have had to pay almost the full cost for another scenery for the update. So in this video, I'm going to take a look at how version 2 compares to the original and if it's worth the cost for existing users. And whilst this isn't a review as such, if you don't currently own the airport, this should hopefully give you a pretty good idea as to whether it's worth purchasing. Before we get started, I will point out that every comparison clip you will see in this video was shot with the same date, time and exact same camera angle to give a true comparison. I will also show the version we are looking at in one of the corners of the screen. Alright, let's get into the comparison. First, looking at the airport overall and the surrounding satellite imagery. As you can see from the following clips, the Ortho imagery looks to have been entirely replaced with new imagery, which also appears to have a much more natural colour to it. The airport layout in general is not surprisingly mostly unchanged, except for the notable additions of the new runways, along with the connecting taxiways to it. Next, taking a look at the ground textures and markings. MK Studios' original effort on this was actually pretty nice for the most part, and as you can see in V2, they have been widely changed in coloration with more details added. The contrast and clarity of all areas are improved, and things like tyre marks are much more prevalent across the airport, along with added wear and tear, and spots where various areas on the apron have had maintenance done. The textures have been updated with PBR, which really makes these textures shine, excuse the pun, when compared to version 1. Various stands and taxiways have had new markings applied to match the real-world counterpart too. Along with that, all runways appear to have been updated with new textures, which are also an almost exact match to the real runways, which you love to see. Even more remote areas of the apron have been paid attention to as well. The west apron looking a lot better now, and here you can start to see some of the extra ground clutter and detail present in V2. The new runway intersection also looking very good with updated textures along with the new runways themselves. Next, having a look at the modelling, texturing and details across the airport. This is an area where I was particularly surprised at the scale of change in version 2. First, looking at Pier 1, and I think if you like flying Ryanair and the PMDG 737, you're going to be very happy here. The whole pier has seen a ton of extra modelling and has been completely retextured, with lots of transparent glass added and a completely new interior. The texturing throughout is much better with more detail and resolution, making everything look much more lifelike, with signs of weathering all over. There's also a lot more ground clutter around the pier and on the stands. You should also notice the newly added VDGS system here too. This works using the Null Aero plugin that a number of other developers like Anybuilds and Flightbeam have implemented in their sceneries. The whole thing looks a ton more polished and much more accurate to this area of the airport in the real world. which by comparison almost makes the original look unrecognisable versus the real thing. Some people can give or take the interior, but there's no denying, especially in the case of this pier, it does add a lot of depth and immersion whilst you're sat on the gate. Next, taking a look at the tower and west apron. The tower itself appears to have been reoriented and moved slightly, which again is more accurate to the real thing versus version 1. The model itself for the lower 3/4 appears largely unchanged, but has received new textures which are pretty decent. The biggest change comes in the upper quarter of the tower, which has been completely retextured with various new additions to the model, including transparent glass and a fully modelled interior. The fire station close by has received a pretty big facelift, and you can really start to see some of the amount of extra detail that's been added in here, with a bunch of new ground markings, fences and bollards. Here's another look at that area from a little further out. Looking at the west apron, you can see a ton more clutter and detail has been added across the apron. This old Boeing has been moved a little as well, along with the generic static aircraft removed from this apron. On our way back to the main apron, you can see there's an engine test site here, which is completely new. Next, we'll have a look at Pier 2, which again has seen a massive facelift with a ton of new modelling, texturing and detail added. The glass in the background, however, does seem to flicker a lot in certain lighting conditions. The Dublin Airport Authority building close by has been completely retextured too, with parallax windows added as well. And in the background of this shot, you can start to get a taste of the scope of change in the Landside area. Next, looking at Pier 3, which looks to be primarily retextured along with additional ground clutter. The textures on the jetways have been nicely updated too. Along with that, the glass on this pier has been changed to look a little more like a solid tinted glass, rather than having the baked-in textures it had before. I'm not sure which I like better, to be honest with you, on this one. Next, looking at Terminal 1 and the signage, the difference here in texture quality is really pretty stark. Additional modelling has been added around the signage lettering now as well, so it no longer floats in the air. Next up is Pier 4, which has seen a massive change overall. This appears to be a completely new model, new textures, transparent glass and a fully modelled interior. Looking at the roof here, you can especially see the difference in the detail in the model, and you'll notice the actual pier has moved slightly in position as well. Clutter has been added and updated, along with the jetways changed slightly also. And here's a few more views of Pier 4, which again you can see everywhere is completely different. The difference in quality is much improved, like I say, in every single area. I can't see anything that is reused from the original version here. I think the addition of the interior, again like Pier 1, is a very nice touch and does add a great deal of depth to your view sat at a gate. Next, taking a look at the cargo terminal, which really does look fantastic now. Gone are the flat textures for the signage and on the roof, and in general this area just looks really nice. But again, I'm struggling to see anything present from the old scenery. This looks like a total rework of this area. Next, Terminal 2 and its connection to Pier 4 has been retextured with new glass added. Notice a difference here in ground clutter too. The Terminal 2 building itself appears to have been retextured and the model refined, with the curves having a bit of a smoother appearance, along with some additions to the model on the roof. And finally, let's have a look at the Landside. This, like the interiors, is something people can give or take, but the difference here is pretty stark and, quite frankly, very impressive. I don't really need to say too much here outside of Terminal 1. The whole area is entirely new. Lots of detail has been added, and I'm particularly impressed with the attention to detail in the modelling, adding in curbsides, fencing, signage and more. You'll see there's a bunch of transparent glass added too, and the same treatment has been given outside of Terminal 1. And looking at the Landside overall, you can really see the difference in the satellite imagery as well. It's definitely much better on the Landside this time around. The detail is all fairly subtle, however, from a distance, but you do have to respect the amount of work that must have gone into this. Night lighting has been redone throughout the airport too, as far as I can see, with the interiors giving a nice level of light, which looks great from the outside. And finally, under snow, the airport looks relatively the same, but the roads on the Landside definitely look more realistic. And there we have it. Like I say, not a review as such, but I do hope this comparison helps you draw your own conclusions. I think this is a really fantastic update to a much loved airport by myself and the flight sim community. That being said, it is a paid update, and I think whether it's worth it or not for existing customers will be a personal choice. In my opinion, the amount of work that has been done here does justify an additional charge for the update, especially considering the original scenery was fairly reasonably priced, even more so when there has been a sale. As you've just seen, there's basically no area of the airport that is unchanged, and whilst a few assets have been reused from the original, the large majority is either heavily modified or completely new. That being said, the cost for the update for existing customers is perhaps a little on the steep side. It's around £11, and considering this now makes the total cost for the airport for existing customers over £27, this makes it more expensive than the majority of other sceneries currently available for Microsoft Flight Simulator. This, combined with the fact we've had multiple other scenery developers release major updates to their products with no charge to the customer, will be a bit of a red flag for some. I think many customers wouldn't have missed the addition to the Landside or interiors, and would have preferred this effort was set aside so that we could receive the functional part of the airport accurately updated for less than is being asked for, or for no cost at all. One of the main reasons this update was so anticipated after all is the fact the new runways at Dublin have been in operation now for over 6 months. I think perhaps what might have been a good middle ground would have been if MK Studios released a free update including the additional runways and ground textures, leaving the updated modelling and texturing for a separate release, or even something in between that. This gives customers a choice as to whether they want to pay for the extensive rework or not, while still receiving the functional part of the airport for no cost. Let me know what you guys think to this down in the comments. That all being said, and with cost aside, this is a much needed and a fantastic update to Dublin, bringing it up to modern standards. And if you don't currently own this scenery, I'd highly recommend you go out and buy it. It's well worth the money. I hope this video has helped any of you either on the fence about upgrading or just interested in buying this scenery. It It was super interesting to see how stark the difference is in some areas of this airport and how dated it did in fact actually look. If you have any questions or feedback, please do feel free to let me know down in the comments. Big shout out goes to all of my channel members. Thank you very much for your continued support. I'll catch you soon, hopefully in a live stream or in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye for now.